Welcome to How to Talk to Kids About Anything with Dr. Robyn Silverman, a podcast loaded with practical tips, powerful scripts, personal stories, and simple steps to make even the toughest conversations easier. So get ready to get the information you need to make the impact you want from someone you trust, your friend, parenting expert, Dr. Robyn Silverman.
Hello and welcome to How to Talk to Kids About Anything, where we give you the tips, scripts, stories, and steps to make even the toughest conversations easier. I'm so honored to be your host, Dr. Robyn Silverman, child and teen development specialist, author, and speaker, and most importantly, parent of two great kids who give me the opportunity to love, learn, and grow every single day, whether I want to or not. Believe me, I get it. It's not always easy, but we're in this together, and we have some great people helping us along the way. Now, we often get a great deal of advice about how to raise our children, but don't always hear the best ways we can take care of ourselves and stay sane while raising our children. Who can you turn to when things aren't going smoothly? How can you talk about it when you are really struggling? How do you cope with anger or exhaustion or frustration and avoid becoming the one who does everything, even when you have nothing left? Today, we are going to speak to my friend and colleague, Kate Rope, for the answers to these questions. Kate Rope is an award-winning freelance journalist and author of Strong as a Mother, How to Be Happy, Healthy, and most importantly, Sane from Pregnancy to Parenthood, the only guide to taking care of you. She writes about mental health and parenting for the New York Times, the Washington Post, Time, and many other publications. She's currently co-creating an audio documentary about medical research during the Vietnam War with Alan Alda. It will be released by Audible in fall of 2020. You can find her work at katerope.com. So welcome, Kate, to How to Talk to Kids About Anything.
Hi, so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm thrilled to have you. I'm really excited to talk about your book, which I read cover to cover. But before we get into the meat of the matter, for those who haven't had the opportunity to meet you, read your book or your articles, can you tell us what gets you up in the morning and what sent you on the path to writing about how to stay healthy, happy, and most importantly, sane from pregnancy to parenthood?
Sure. So what gets me up in the morning is the coffee that my husband makes for me.
Must be good coffee.
Yes. And just the fact that he actually delivers it to my bedside,
That's
which is
beautiful.
A lovely thing.
That's love language right there.
Keep a marriage
Yes,
happy.
it's beautiful.
Yes, that is coffee is part of my love language and his too. And I got started writing on this book. So I've always been a journalist, and I've always been interested in health and medicine. Once upon a time, considered going to med school, but decided that I get too interested in too many things to focus on any one thing for too long. So journalist seemed like a better option. And I also really knew I wanted to be a mom. Always knew I wanted to be a mom. I was kind of the weirdo in college. We would have conversations and all my friends would be talking about, the big career they wanted to have. And I'd be talking about wanting to have kids, even though I did want to have a career. And they'd all say, well, not yet. And I'm like, well, no, not yet. But I think about it a lot. And then when I had a kid, the whole thing kind of slapped me silly. It just wasn't at all what I expected it to be. It was just so much harder in so many ways I couldn't have anticipated. And one of them was that I developed postpartum anxiety, which not everybody knows about. We all hear about postpartum depression, feeling depressed, sad, the lady on the hospital brochure when you go home from the hospital who just is staring out the window and mysteriously doesn't have a baby to take care of in that moment, but is really sad and is put together. It's a very odd picture. Does not mesh with anything that actually really happens when you have a baby. But anxiety is actually much more common, and but it's not talked about as much. So I didn't know that I had postpartum anxiety until really about 9 months in, when I was pretty dysfunctional. And at that point, I found a reproductive psychiatrist. I got on some medication, and the whole experience changed for me. And it was like a religious conversion. And from there on out, I just decided that I wanted to talk about the challenging parts of motherhood, as well as, or maybe not even the blissful parts, because everybody else has that covered. We have this narrative of motherhood that's so beautiful and blissful and magical. And I wanted to talk about the fact that, it's a life-changing experience, and it would be crazy to think any life-changing experience wouldn't also be incredibly hard. So I wanted to talk about that, and I wanted to support women through that, whatever that looked like for them. If they were like me and they ended up needing medication and psychotherapy to get through it, or if they just needed to figure out how to like not hate their husband in the first year after having a baby, whatever the struggle was, I wanted to be there to support women finding a way through it.
Right.
That's where it came from.
And a lot of your strategies and what you talk about in the book actually apply to any parent. I mean, really, if we're talking about self-care and equitable division of the labor in the house. And I mean, it involves this other person very much, whether it's if you're a mom or a dad. And you're right about these challenges. I literally just got off with a friend of mine who was talking about her challenges, and we were laughing about the perfect pictures on Facebook of people taking pictures of their kids like in flower fields with their hair just, flipping just so, and how they're saying things like, oh, I'm so blessed with this beautiful time and of being with my children. And meanwhile, like you're like hiding in a closet, like pulling your hair out. So I think that taking that stuff and pulling it out of the shadows is so important. There's so many supposed tos in parenting, and this starts while our children are in utero for those who are carrying a child, and into young childhood. We hear, shoulds and about tummy time and feeding the rainbow and sleeping when they sleep, as well as many don'ts, like things that you need to avoid, nixing the screens and minimizing stress and not multitasking when you're talking with your children so that they have your full attention. The do's and don'ts are always there, and they can sometimes lead to parents putting themselves on the back burner. One parent told me recently that she hasn't had the time to get away from her kids since they were born. They're teenagers now. So how can parents begin to prioritize themselves when they often put themselves lowest on the totem pole?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say it's as easy as like, go get a mani-pedi or, have a margarita with your best friend. Because I think a lot of times the way we express these things to parents are not really helpful. They're not self-care. They might be a fun outing, but they're not actually self-care. And I also think that, there's a larger conversation around the kind of support that our society really should be providing mothers, so that sometimes people and fathers, parents, so that sometimes people get a little bristly at the idea of, here's how, mom should take care of themselves. Well, no, the government should be providing better childcare and all these supports. Moms are already so stressed. Why are we putting one more thing on them? So with an understanding that is kind of the cultural situation we're in, and I'm not belittling that, but until we have more supports, I do think that it is one of the few things that you do actually have control over as a parent, is taking care of yourself. And that totally changes as your kids grow. In the beginning, it might feel very small, and it might be much larger, when they're in their teens. But I think, if you start your journey to parenthood with a pregnancy, during pregnancy, practicing, like for me, self-care is figuring out what makes you feel good, what makes you feel centered, what makes you feel calm, and then making that an everyday part of your life, or an every weekly part of your life, whether that's exercise, whether it's singing in a choir, meditation, bike rides. For my husband, it's journaling in a coffee shop by himself. Maybe what those things are right away, or maybe you need to kind of experiment with them. And for that, I recommend thinking back to like high school or college, or times when you had a lot of time to explore some, extracurriculars and find something that really made you feel good and kind of took you away from the present moment or from stresses when you did it. So experimenting with what those things are. And then if we are starting in pregnancy, trying to build them into your life so that they're harder to set aside once the baby enters it, and if you're starting while you have a small baby you've adopted, or you haven't thought about it till then. Then again, just trying to figure out the little ways you can work it in. And for my, the example I always give is my husband and I came up with this plan where we lived in a tiny New York apartment when we had our first daughter, and he would do our laundry once a week, which was copious, and hours long project. And he would go to the laundromat, and then he would go to the little muffin shop across the street and write in his journal. So he's getting the laundry done, but he's getting some time to himself, you know? And I don't know that I was as good in the beginning of doing that as he was. I think it's taken me years to figure out what kind of fills my bucket, as pre-K teachers would say. But starting to think about self-care not as a particular act, but as a way of relating to yourself and prioritizing yourself, you know, because it could be different in different circumstances. If you're fighting with a teenager, self-care could look like saying to your teen, like, I'm really riled up and I'm going to go take a half an hour to read in my room so I can come back to this conversation more calmly, you know, or, you know, it could be once my kids were old enough, for me, it was, you know, daily exercise is really my sanity saver. And meditation, but that had to wait until I could go once a week to my meditation class and learn how to do it. You know, so I think it really depends on where you are in the parenting journey, but just starting to think about like what makes you feel good, what makes you feel calm, or what doesn't. You know, self-care could also be. I mean, it's taking me till my kids were 9 and no, how old are my kids? 8 and 12. To figure out that I really get triggered by loud noise. And I learned this from another wonderful parenting expert, Carla Naumburg, who I highly recommend having on your show if you haven't already.
Noted.
She has a great book called How to Stop Losing Your SH blank T with your kids. It has a little asterisk where the I should be. And in it, she talks about, you know, it's about how to not yell at your kids, essentially. And she talks about recognizing your triggers. And I'm going off on a tangent, but I'll wrap it up quickly. And she talks about noise for her. And I always felt guilty that as a mom, I hate noise. Like I always felt like you talk to moms and they're like, oh, I love the noise of all the neighborhood kids running into my house and happily, you know, it feels like life. I love it. And I'm like, I'm a terrible mother. Like that noise drives me crazy. I don't mind having tons of kids in my house. I don't mind them grabbing stuff out of my fridge. I love that. But just do it quietly, you know? And to finally realize that, like, in order for me to be a good parent and a happier person, I got to have more quiet. So I put on jazz or, you know, bossa nova music, and I talk to my kids like, this is too loud for inside, please take it outside. So could be figuring out what triggers you, but just recognizing that your needs are as important as your children's needs and that you will better meet their needs when you can meet yours. So that's really the point of view I'm coming from in whenever I'm writing for parents. Not adding to the to-do list, trying to think about how can we make it work with the to-do list or feel good within the context of the to-do list, but not another should.
Yeah, I love the idea of understanding that you have to prioritize yourself, and that, you know, by taking care of yourself, you're actually doing something good for your family. I agree with that. And those triggers are definitely something that I'm thinking about. I also get very triggered by noise, and I tell my children, we have to have an inside voice here, and what you're doing right now is really outside voices, outside play. Could you please take it outside? And I think it probably makes some sense to set that up better. And instead of in the moment saying that, in a calm moment, you know, whether it's at dinner time or another time, to be able to sit down with your kids and say, you know, I'm really trying to figure out what triggers me and makes me feel frustrated, because I don't like getting frustrated. I don't like that feeling. I don't like yelling at you or whatever the reaction is. And what I'm realizing is these are some things that trigger me. And so I'd like to focus on that. And if you could help me by taking that kind of thing outside, that would really be great. So we can bring our kids in to helping us with that. We don't have to do it alone. Isn't that right?
Yeah, 100%. And in fact, I'm a big fan of family meetings. We don't have them regularly, but we have them sort of whenever we need them. And we had a big one at the start of lockdown for COVID where I said, you know, we all need to be able to say when things are too much and that we need a break. And we came up with the term reset. So whenever like things are spiraling and an argument's brewing, or, you know, the kids are yelling, and, you know, we just say reset. And, you know, for some people, it's just a reminder to calm down. For like my 8-year-old and me, we need a little more space to calm down and a little time. But I'm all for sort of presenting problems to kids and having them be part of the solution. Because then when you're in that moment, you know, they'll say to me, "Oh, Mom, why don't you go take some deep breaths?" You know, and it makes them feel like they have ownership a little bit, and like they know how to help me. And the other great thing about modeling this for your kids, or the other great thing about doing it, is that you're modeling it for your kids. And I think about this particularly for girls and women. You know, there is unfortunately still this really high expectation of what mothers are supposed to do. And I want my kids to know that I'm raising 2 girls, and I want them to know that taking care of themselves is really important. And so I do it, not, you know, that this is Mom's time to take care of herself, or Mom has to do this exercise every day, or she gets grumpy. And if they start to see me getting kind of grumpy or uncentered, they'll suggest it. You know, they'll be like, "Mom, have you meditated today? Or do you want to go take some time in your room?" Or, you know,
that's beautiful. I mean, it's great to have the kids be able to be part of that solution. And I saw throughout your book, you know, you were recommending knowing who your people are. I mean, one of the ways that we can ease our struggle is by creating a strong group of friends who, you know, quote unquote, get it. And they're far from perfect. They listen, they support. So you have your children who are on your team, and your spouse who's bringing you coffee in the morning. That's beautiful. And, you know, yes, you have these moments of bliss, of course, because we love our children. But our friends can give us some perspective and support when things feel like they're crashing down, and help you to realize that it's not just yourself, which is the kind of conversation I was just having with a friend of mine who was struggling just before this call. So how can we create this group for ourselves, as it often feels impossible to find your people when you are struggling? You feel like you're on your own. So what are some of the ways that we can create that group, that couple of people that help us to feel supported and like we're not crazy, or it's just us?
Yeah. I mean, I think paying attention to your interactions with the people that are in your life, just to realize sort of who do you interact with and come away feeling a little stronger, a little lighter. Who do you interact with and come away feeling kind of guilty, or, oh, I should be doing this, you know, just kind of taking this moment as you transition into parenthood, or even if you're already deep in it, to think about who you already have in your life that you want more of, and who maybe just at this moment in time is not the support you need. And then, you know, cultivating those friendships. That's one way to do it. I think online moms groups, they can be terrible because they can make you feel sort of like, oh, I should be, you know, making organic kombucha for my, you know, my fetus. But they can also be a place where you can anonymously share sort of
organic kombucha for my fetus. I don't know if we're going to put that on a meme, but that is hilarious.
That's my big business idea that comes out of that. Nobody steal it. Yeah, no, like, I'm in the group One Bad Mother. You know, there's the podcast One Bad Mother, and I love their online group because I find it very supportive and kind of irreverent. It's good for me. You know, wouldn't be good for every mom.
I have one that I'm part of these business women that are also moms, and it is just all the truth. And that's what you want, like just people who are like, yeah, this is not a great day for me, and here's why. And you can give support, and you can laugh, and you can relate, and just pull people up. It's none of the, you know, organic kombucha crowd, where they're saying you should be doing this, and if you're not, you're terrible. I mean, my daughter loves kombucha. Nothing against kombucha, but it is important to have those people you can be real with, because it's not just hearing about what other people are doing and sort of feeling ashamed you're not doing it, but also that when you're around people who you feel like you can't be honest with, that you try to put on, the perfect happy face and say everything is perfect and my kids are amazing and there's nothing that's tearing me apart, because it doesn't change the inside of you. The inside of you is still, if you're in that moment and in a time of challenge, that needs to be released and needs to be heard. And if you're constantly around people where you have to pretend, you're not giving yourself what you need, right?
Right. And I think you can experiment a little bit with this, where you sort of share a little bit of your struggle and see how people pick up on it. If you're at the playground or you're in a new preschool and you're trying to make those new friends, you can kind of drop a hint here or there that's sort of true to who you are, and see how people, do they pick it up and run with it, or do they just go, oh, I never thought of that, and then dead silence. I have said some things over the years that have really shut a conversation down. But 2 weeks into having a baby, and someone said, how's it going? And I was like, it's really hard. And they were like, oh, because that's not the script.
It's a very precious. This is the most perfect time. I just want it to last forever. Is the script?
But for me, I put out a little flag about who I am, and I see who raises the flag higher and who just walks by.
Right.
So I think, and the other thing that I do talk about in my book too is, because you do get so much advice as a parent during pregnancy, during your whole parenting experience, is that to know that the people usually mean well. Doesn't mean you have to be best friends with them. Mm-hmm. They still may not be your people, but they may be struggling and really, they're having their own relationship to becoming a parent, and maybe they've decided that this one way of doing things is really working for them and really what they're going to hang their hat on. Sure. and they want you to know that, and that usually comes from a place of them going through the same process you're going through. It's just coming out a different way. So I think, we all go through sort of zealous periods as we learn this stuff, mm-hmm. But if there were one way to parent, we'd all know it by now.
Right, exactly. After talking about the friend space and knowing that we can find our people, and the more that you do drop these hints and realize, when my friend was on the phone with me today and she was asking me questions about something else, but then she was telling me she feels guilty a lot of the time while, trying to find something for her child for the summer, because she knows that they need some space from one another. And I'm like, are you kidding? Of course you need space right now. You just told me you've been having all these challenges. This isn't something to feel guilty about. This is something to listen to in your heart. And I think she was relieved to hear that, yes, somebody is getting it. And it does sometimes feel like you can't admit that stuff. And after you find some of those people in your life who can validate your feelings and not, tell them that they're either the best person in the world or the worst person in the world, but just giving them some solid strategies or hearing them out. You also want to find, if you are living with a significant other, some time to be a couple. And I think this is an area that we don't often talk about when we're talking about becoming parents or being parents. We often focus on how to best raise a child, but we're not talking about the time for the couple. It's certainly a challenging time for a couple when they are feeling inundated with things that they need to do with their children to make them better or to help them feel good. And there's always seemed to be something to do, and you don't know if the kids are going to wake up and walk through your bedroom door or cry their eyes out and throw up on the sitter when you're about to walk out the door for date night. So what's your advice for carving out couple time, both fun date time and even intimate time when you have children?
Yeah. Well, first, I'm just going to say that I'm not very good at it. I'm just going to come clean that I feel like this is an area that my husband and I are constantly like, okay, we need to do more of this. Okay, yes, we're going to do more of that. And then 6 months later, we're like, remember when we said we were going to do more of that? Yeah, okay, let's really start doing more of that.
Yeah.
So I find it challenging.
Right.
And I think we all do. I think that one thing to do is to try and get in touch with the things that connected you before you had kids, for date nights or for hanging out together. Like if you really loved going to concerts, then, making those part of your date night, and because it brings you back to this way of connecting prior to kids. In the beginning, just pull it, just whatever, stealing little moments here or there. A babysitter watches, a neighbor watches the baby while you guys go and walk and have an ice cream down the street. It can be small. I think my husband and I try to sit down at the end of the day and look at each other and talk about something other than the logistics of the day or the logistics of the next day. Just asking them, how are you doing? How's this going for you? And then I talk very honestly in the book about sex because I feel like returning to sex after bringing a baby into your life can be really difficult. And I talk about sort of just being honest and experimenting with maybe I think sometimes what happens is everyone puts sex on that's the thing you have to be doing. And if you're not having sex, then you're not being connected. But that might not be realistic, especially if you've had a vaginal birth or a C-section, or if you're breastfeeding and you just feel like this baby is on you all the time and you don't really want to get sweaty with another human being. Starting to have intimate moments that are different, like just tickling each other or back rubs or cuddling or, whatever feels good to you. I had this great interview with Dan Savage for the book, and Dan Savage is like, I feel sorry for straight couples because sex is the goal, and if you don't get to the goal, you've failed. And he's like, with gay couples, every conversation begins with, what are you into?
Yes.
There's so many different ways to go about it. And so I think if you can not have penetrative sexual intercourse as your goal, and just how can we make our bodies feel nicer together, and it might be totally different 3 months in. Now, when you have tweens, maybe you're, planning your Friday night sex night, and Dan Savage says that actually planning is a good idea. I know a lot of people go back and forth on that, but he's like, it sort of takes the pressure off other moments. So some people like that idea, some people don't, but just to kind of redefine, just experiment with how it feels to connect with your partner in other ways, maybe playing cards, maybe, and working up to date nights or, longer times away from kids as they get older. We started having grandparents take care of the kids pretty early on, and going away for a weekend and, once a year for our anniversary. And that was pretty great. So if that's, at all feasible.
Yeah. And it's important to admit that, that's important. Again, that putting that priority forward and saying that this is something that I want to work on and that deserves attention. And that even though we have children, the children don't get to govern every single moment of the day, that we really do need to have some time for ourselves. And that is taking care of the children after all, because when we take care of ourselves, we're taking care of them. We're taking care of our family. So making sure that you do realize that and that you prioritize it with one another, and that you explain it to your children. There have been times when I've said to my children that the time that we have together as when mommy and daddy are not just mommy and daddy are very important too, because we want to show our love to each other, and that we want to be able to talk to one another, and that we are more than just mom and dad. We're also Jason and Robyn in our case, and we need that for ourselves, and explaining to our kids that when we do that, it makes us come back stronger and be a better mom and dad. And so they're aware of that. We, again, bring them into that conversation so that they can be some more supportive. Because otherwise,
and also, you're also modeling healthy relationships.
Yes.
You want your children to have healthy relationships when they get out into the world of dating and marriage, if they do. And so modeling, what it means to prioritize time with that person and be kind to that person. And we just had a whole family meeting about bedtimes, because now that my 12-year-old's older, now that my 12-year-old is 12, bedtimes are going later. And it was just, we had lost our, we used to have 8 o'clock, we'd be on the couch till 10, and I'm an early to bedder. So that was our sacred time, and we had lost it. And we were realizing that was taking a toll on us. And so we were like, okay, total bedtime revamp. We have to be out of your rooms at 9 o'clock so we have time together, and sometimes my 8-year-old, who would love me to fall asleep with her every night, will say, why do you have to go? And I say, because this is my time to spend with daddy, and I want to spend time with daddy.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I think that, and when they hear that, they understand it. Like, just like you want to have special time with me, and we got this special time together, that daddy and I also need that special time together. And that's just as important. I know that sometimes, the couple situation can get very heated. Because, especially when you're spending a ton of time together in the home and you're not getting out as much, and the kids are acting out, or, especially when the family contributions don't feel equitable. And you talk about that in your book. You feel like you're doing everything, or your name is being called 50 times a day. I'd like to just talk about 2 parts of an issue here. First, how you can ensure that the tasks of parenting are more equitable. And then second, what to do when you're really angry about it, that too much is falling on your shoulders. So they kind of go hand in hand, but they're a little bit separate.
Yeah. Well, again, if you're at the point of either pregnancy or the adoption process, or surrogacy, you're in the planning phase of parenthood. I think it would be ideal to have, and I did not do this, but when I researched my book, I talked to a lot of experts, and I thought, wow, I should have done that. Where you really talk about, my husband and I talked about what our values were, and that was a good conversation to have. But how are we going to break this parenting thing down? Let's split it down the middle, and even to the point of assigning some things. You're in charge of, I love it. There's this economist couple. Oh gosh, I can't remember their names right now, but they had this thing where she was breastfeeding, and so he did all the diapers, and because they're economists, they were like, she does inputs, I do outputs. But literally thinking about your skill sets, your interests, how can we just set it up from the get-go that certain things are one parent's domain and certain things are the other parent's domain. Now, of course, that can switch and you can be involved, but I think that what happens a lot as parent, in the model we have right now, is that mothers become sort of the keeper of all the knowledge. And then it becomes constantly trying to get the partner, teaching them all okay, I'm going away, so you've got, this is the pediatrician, and this is how you do that. And you have to, in order to share power, in order to get responsibilities off your plate, there's so much involved in that transfer that it's almost not worth it. So I think starting from the beginning with giving each partner sort of zones of responsibility, and in my family, my husband is in charge of all school stuff, so school communications, teacher communications, that kind of thing. I think is really helpful, and really write it down, even And then you'll switch it up as you get into parenting and you realize how things work. But I think trying to really look at the labor of parenting and divide it evenly so that you share knowledge about important zones like health and education, and safety, and is really helpful. Now, if you haven't done that, or you did and you're human and therefore it's falling apart at some point, I think that new parenthood especially, but all parenthood you can be very sensitive. You may have different approaches to things, and it might really upset you when one parent's doing something differently than you would. But to try as best you can to sort of use almost like nonviolent communication in order to get buy-in when you're having these kinds of tough conversations. And I actually have up on my fridge the 4 principles of nonviolent communication. And they basically are saying, instead of saying like, it drives me nuts when we're late because you're taking forever, right? It would be like, I have a need to be on time. So I'm feeling frustrated that you're not ready. Could you help me be on time? Then you like a request by doing this. So you're giving them a very specific thing to do. You're saying what your feeling is, and it's based on your need. I have a need for the diaper pail to be emptied at the end of the night so it really bothers me when we smell it. Could you help me by emptying the diaper pail, every night, or when you notice it's full. Right. So it's about sort of it's about owning what your own needs are, but then also taking it away from the person, like, you always do this, or you hurt me when you do that, and just saying, I feel hurt, this is the outcome. And it's less attacking, because I think, attacking never works, because a lot of people get defensive, like, I'm always doing this. And then the other parent comes back with, oh yeah, well, I'm always doing this, right? Instead of saying like, for whatever reason, I'm super wiped right now and I just can't do the 3 a.m. wake up with the baby. Could we switch for a few nights where you do the 3 a.m. wake up? I think that would help me feel more rested.
So let's do a couple more of those, because I think that is really helpful. And since people come here to really find out how to talk about a lot of this would be great. So what if a parent does something that really frustrates the other parent, and I'm going to give you what not to say about that in this situation, and you give me how we can kind of shift it. So like, say this, not that. So you really pissed me off.
I'm feeling really angry because.
You never clean the dishes in the sink.
I feel like I keep being the one to clean the dishes and I'm not getting help.
I'm always the one waking up with the kids on the weekends.
So I'm feeling really tired, and I think maybe the reason is that on the weekends I tend to be doing most of the wake ups with the kids. And tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that's the pattern that's been happening. And what can we do to change that? And again, that's sort of like the kid thing. The kid, having the meeting, having the person be part of the solution, rather than labeling the person. There's sort of words that kind of are giveaways that you're going to put someone on the defensive. You always, like blanket statements. Yes. And where you're accusing the other person of, you're sort of attributing it to their character.
And it's like intentional, like they've done it intentionally, and right. And they set a course in motion because that's the way they wanted it in the first place.
Right.
Okay.
And it just puts them on the defensive, makes them less likely to engage. And then also it doesn't, it takes two to tango. Like, maybe you've been doing the wake ups, but you haven't said anything about it for 3 weeks. So now you're saying something about it, right. And now this person can hear you because you're saying it in a way that is like focused on problem solving and not on personalities or, character flaws.
All right, we'll do one more. My name is being called 50 times per day. I never get a moment off the clock.
So I'm like, that's true. I'm like, how do I rebut that? I think that, I feel like my name is being called 50 times a day, and I feel like I'm just not getting a break. Like, could you help me? Mm-hmm. Could you help me figure out, what we can do so that the kids go to you when they have a problem too.
Right. Or a moment when when I'm off the clock and maybe take a walk and you're here, and obviously they would have no choice but to go to the other parent in that situation. So maybe it's like building in a break.
Early parenthood, there is a lot of that, like where you just sort of have to remove yourself from the situation and let the other parent be in charge. I think like as you learn your parenting rhythm, you can kind of do that more fluidly with everybody staying in place, but you do kind of have to, you need to let the other parent and make mistakes and find their way and develop that relationship.
Right, because usually then you get like the kids are saying things like, but mommy makes the best pancakes, but I like the way mommy cuts my sandwich, or whatever you wind up getting, and the other parent is perfectly capable, but it becomes the pattern that you're the one who cuts the sandwich. So then every time at lunchtime you have to be there, right? Like you're not getting the break only because the pattern has been set in place and you haven't voiced that it's frustrating to you that you're always on the clock. So you need to break the pattern. And
your child hasn't learned to roll with the fact that like the other parent cuts the red peppers too thick.
Yes.
And like sometimes that happens in life.
Yeah, it does sometimes happen to and maybe they need to learn to say to the other parent, I like the way that I like my peppers being cut thinner. Would you mind doing that? I feel that the peppers are being cut too thickly.
I have a need.
I have a need.
To have thinner peppers. So I get frustrated when I get to school and the peppers are so thick.
Yes,
Would you mind helping me by cutting thinner peppers? And then eventually that translates into the kids cutting the peppers themselves. Yes. And then they get to do it exactly how they want it.
That's exactly right. All right, give me your top tip. What do you want people to come away with from this interview, from your book, so that they can apply it in their own lives?
Ooh, just one. I think my overarching message to parents is that your mental health is important and it's worth taking the time to figure out how to support it. And that is best for everybody. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you don't need to feel guilty taking time by yourself. You don't need to feel guilty getting psychotherapy. You don't need to feel guilty taking a medication if you have a biochemical imbalance in your brain that makes you prone to anxiety like I do. Mm-hmm. I think that you really matter and it's worth, and sometimes what you need may be about advocating for more government support of parents, or maybe talking to your partner about changing up the roles and responsibilities, but it's worth it. You're worth it. And the time you put in will, you will be paid back in spades.
Good point. Give us the resource of the week. Where can we go to get more information about you and your book and the work you're doing?
So the work I'm doing and articles and such, you can find at katerope.com. And I have a lot of articles on there, both directed toward parents and moms specifically to take care of their mental health, but I also have parenting stuff on there. I had a piece recently in the Times about that it's not too late to teach your kids how to play independently, which I was so happy to learn. And now COVID is the perfect time to do that. And I had an article recently in the Washington Post about how to keep yourself from losing it with your kids during lockdown. So you can find those resources at my website, katerope.com, and you can find my book, Strong as a Mother, anywhere books are sold. It's a great time to support your local independent bookseller and call them up and have them order it and be ready for curbside pickup. But also it is available on large sellers like Barnes & Noble and Amazon. And you can follow me on Twitter at Kate Rope. Mm-hmm. and I am trying to learn Instagram. So you can send me messages and I'll reply to them in 3 months.
Well, we'll be creating memes, and I'm going to be putting it up on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. And so maybe you'll be going back and forth with me on Instagram, and you'll get really
Maybe
good at it.
Because my goal before my next book comes out is to learn Instagram.
Perfect. That sounds like a plan. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today, Kate, and talking to us about really taking care of our mental health and talking about the couple and being a person, not just a parent. It's so important that we ask for help, we find our group, our crew, and that we give ourselves a break, because there's a lot going on and we need it and we deserve it. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
You are welcome. Thank you so much for having me. And what I like to say is parenting is the hardest job you will ever love.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, I've got my takeaways, and sweet friends, I know you have yours. So let's discuss them. Come up on Facebook, go to the Dr. Robyn Silverman page, or let's chat about it at drrobynsilverman.com or twitter.com/Dr. Robyn. I'm also on Instagram, as I said, under Dr. Robyn Silverman. I'll be going back and forth with Kate on Twitter and on Facebook and on Instagram, so that we'll be developing some memes, and you can take some of the great quotes that Kate said today and maybe send them to your friends, put them up on your stuff, because there are some things that we really need to remember about taking care of ourselves. And if you love this podcast, I hope you could go up to iTunes and rate and review it so other people can learn about the solutions and use them in their own homes. I truly appreciate it. That's all the time we have for today. My fellow parents, leaders, and educators, thank you so much for tuning in to How to Talk to Kids About Anything. For more information on books, articles, speaking engagements, or curriculum, please visit drrobynsilverman.com. There's so many great podcasts up there, and the show notes to this podcast will be up there as well. I look forward to weathering the storms and enjoying the sunny side of life together. And please remember, even on the days when you fall short, you've got this. You're here. You're getting the information you need. Perhaps you heard something today about equitable division of labor, or how to talk when you're angry, or whatever it might be, and you say, I've been messing that up big time. That's okay. We all make a lot of mistakes. You're getting the information, and you can do it differently tomorrow. You can do it differently later today. You can do it differently in a minute. I know it's not easy, but never forget there's always tomorrow. Parenting is the ultimate do-over. I see you, and I'm right there with you. And as there are moments when we doubt our know-how, our choices, and our sweet sanity, please know you are 10 times the parent you think you are. Until next time, this is Dr. Robyn Silverman with How to Talk to Kids About Anything. Please tune in again and keep connecting through conversation. See you next week.
You've been listening to How to Talk to Kids About Anything with Dr. Robyn Silverman. For more information on books, articles, speaking engagements, or curriculum, please visit drrobynsilverman.com.